Okay, we're back on SQL test 01. So we can go ahead and check the cluster. So we now have the failover cluster manager. So the next step is for us to create a cluster. But before that, the validation rule for the cluster is going to run, and that will determine if two servers are ready for clustering. So this is the failover cluster manager. You're going to click on validation, uh, validation, next, enter server name, test 01 02. Okay, so the two servers, and next, run test. Next. So this is going through the server, both test 01 and test 02, to validate the configurations to make sure that both servers are ready for clustering. So once this is successful, we can go ahead and create a new cluster, then add the two servers as part of the clustering. Okay, this is almost complete. Test passed. Click finish. Now we can go ahead and create a new cluster. So we're going to name this cluster SQL 2022 FC, which means SQL cluster. So first we're going to go ahead and add the server that will be part of the cluster. So we're going to add both test 01 and test 02. Okay. Click on next. Then I'm going to provide the cluster name and the IP address. So the cluster name is going to be SQL 2022 failover cluster 01. This can be any name, but this has to be a name that will be easy for you to recognize, to indicate the kind of clustering that you have and what you intend to do with it. It's going to be created in the Active Directory. So once the name is typed in here during the installation, is going to be in Active Directory, and we're going to go ahead and add it as part of the computer. Okay. And then the IP address, we're going to use 40. Click on next. Next. Okay, so our failover clustering is being configured. Let's wait for it. So as a DBA, it's your responsibility to configure the SQL, to install the SQL, and in some cases to create this cluster if the infrastructure team doesn't know how to do it. But in most situations in the company, the infrastructure team must have set up the cluster for you, set up the SQL, but is a very good idea for you to set this up by yourself, especially if you know how to do it, so that if there's any issue, if there's any need for you to troubleshoot this in future, you already know how this was set up, you know, server, everything that was involved, the configuration, and knowing that is going to make it easy for you to manage your server very well. So um, I will advise that as a DBA, though this might not be your primary responsibility, but I will advise that you go ahead and set this up if your server team allow you to do it, because it's going to be helpful for you whenever you are trying to do the troubleshooting if there's anything happen to your server, because you know how everything was set up. Okay, a failover cluster is created. We have our two nodes, server 1 and server 2. They're both up, and we need to go to the Active Directory and give permission to this cluster to create objects. Okay, let's go back to the Active Directory. All right, we're in the Active Directory. As you can see, the name of the cluster is added as one of the computer. So we want to give this cluster access to be able to create objects within our organization unit. So need to right click this, go to the property. As you can see, the security tab is not available, so I'm going to change the view, show me the advanced option. I'm going to go to the security tab, go to the property, get the security, then going to add. I'll need to find the computer, to find the name of the SQL. A SQL failover cluster that we just create this one. Gonna select this, click OK, get full control, apply, and OK. That's it. So that enable the cluster to have the permission to create object within the OU. So the next step now is to go back to SQL test 01 and SQL test 02 to enable the SQL always on. So once again, we are back in SQL test 01. I'm going to go into the configuration window. Most of the configuration for SQL happens in the configuration manager, because that is where the SQL engine can be stopped and restarted. All the SQL services can be managed here. So now we need to go into our SQL engine, go to the property, and under the always on group, you can see now that this is now part of the cluster. We can now enable this as part of a always on availability group. If the cluster has not been created, we're not going to be able to do this. So because we've done everything that we did at the beginning of this course, set up the cluster, enable the cluster, and this computer is part of the cluster, that is where we're able to enable the always on availability group. Okay, I'm gonna apply this and click OK. So we're gonna go to test 02 and do the same thing. Okay, we are back on test 02. Same thing, we'll go to the SQL configuration manager. Okay, so click on SQL, go to the property. In the properties, we go to the always on and click enable always on availability group and click OK. So go ahead and restart the service. Same thing has to be done in both environments, both SQL Test 01 and SQL Test 02. So now that we've set up the clustering and enable the always on, we can now go back to our SQL Server and start the other training from there. We're going to learn how to create always on and how to manage other SQL databases. Now, because these two servers are part of always on, doesn't mean we cannot create a single database that is not part of the always on. You can create as many databases as you want. Then you can now select those that you want to be part of the always on. And whenever you want to connect to this database, all you need to use is going to have the endpoint that will be created for you. And that endpoint is what you're going to be using to connect to the always on. But when we get to that, I will show you how to do this. But right now, we have our always on enable. Our clustering is ready. You can now go back to SQL Management Studio and continue from there. Thank you.